Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Take Five with Steph. And today I'm joined by Dawn, and we're going to have a great conversation about collaboration, communication, and how that all ties into culture. I can't wait. This is one of my favorite topics. And I've invited Dawn because we met each other in a business community that we were both part of. And I can't wait for you to hear more about her today. Dawn, why don't you kick it off by sharing a little bit more about you?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me, Steph. It is truly my pleasure. So, I am the CEO of the Schuler Group, and we are an organizational development company. What does that mean? Well, it means we go into organizations and through our training, consulting, and coaching services, we help them work better together. And as Steph said, this is through communication, collaboration, and culture. And the quick soundbite I'll offer is that there's a reason why they call it human resources, and it's not to just encompass the benefits and compensation packages for employees. It's the fact that the humans in an organization are truly a precious resource. And so if you make that an investment, whether it's your time, energy, training, other resources, they are going to flourish and be productive, and your organization will flourish as a result.
I love that you share that they're a precious resource. I don't know if we see that enough. That's really well said. Tell me a little bit, what inspired you to create your business about this?
So I will try to keep that story short. So I have been assisting, managing, running businesses for the last 20 years. Back in 2014, when my soon to be husband, Mark, moved from California to where we were living in Maryland, it was the opportunity to not just merge our lives, but merge what we do business wise. And so I have the background in business and communication. His background is in teaching, facilitating, clinical psychology. He was a psychotherapist for 28 years. And so we looked at how do we take all of that and put it together? And that's when the Schuler Group was born. It's that idea of take that family systems dynamic from clinical psychology, overlay it on an organization, and it pretty much fits. So let's focus on the business piece, the communication piece, and then the relationship piece.
That's a great story. I like that you both came together personally and professionally. I think there's a really good story there that you can tell me more about that another time. When we say communication, I'm not sure we unpack that enough. And I want to explore you had a background in business communication. I also studied communication in school, and I realized I really like communication. I'm not sure everyone gets that type of instruction or understanding of how what we communicate gets interpreted by another person and how to understand whether they heard it the way we expected.
Mhm.
Do you have any tips? You don't have to go into a big long story, but any quick tips that we are good reminders we should keep in mind when we're communicating with people at work?
First of all, you are absolutely right, Steph, that communication is this big, broad topic and concept. And it's not, you really can't distill it down to one thing. One of our programs is dysfunctional communication styles in the workplace. And when we developed that, it begged for, well, if there's dysfunctional communication, what is functional communication? And if you really look at it at its basic, it is if you and I are communicating, I have a need that, and that is what I am trying to communicate to you. Then you have all the things that are going on with you. You have your own needs. And so if you hear what I say, how are you relating to that? How are you interpreting it? How is it getting blended and layered in with all the things that are going on with you? And so then if you think about like a tennis match and you lob the ball back over to me, have you understood what I've tried to convey? Is there a meeting of the minds? Am I going to get what I need? And so the functional communication piece is that works well. Unfortunately, we tend to be pretty unconscious when it comes to communicating. We don't necessarily think before we speak. We don't think about how our gestures, our facial expressions, our body language is coming across, at least in person or on Zoom. Um, we're maybe not active listening to hear what the other person is saying. Are we picking up on cues? Do they seem confused? So to, I hope, quickly answer your question, how can people communicate better at work? It's bringing in all those elements. And emotional intelligence, or EQ, is a primary piece of really being able to communicate the best that you can.
Well said. I think you did a really good job explaining that. To add to what you shared, what I tend to focus on when I'm working with managers who have to communicate really well is also explaining to them that how they present themselves and show up is also, like, their physical interaction is also a form of communication. So you could be saying one thing, but showing another just in your expression and your body. And I don't know if we pay enough attention to that. And it might not always be easy to talk about. I had some really great mentors early on in my life that shared with me, and especially female mentors that shared with me, Steph, if you present yourself that way, you might not be taken seriously. So there's interesting things too of combining the verbal with the physical, even in a virtual environment on camera. I almost think it's almost like being on display, that how you are on Zoom might even be more important than in person, because people are only seeing a little box of you, and that box is all they have to go on. So hand gestures and, are you standing? Are you sitting? Are you leaning forward? These little things can have an unintentional impact on what we're saying. Have you noticed that as you work on communication with people?
Absolutely. And to your point, it's one of the reasons why I have an 8-foot stuffed dragon in my background, because it is a reminder that we are not robots and machines, as much as we may love our phones and AI and all of that. But at the core, we are human, and we're all individuals. And so the fact that I love dragons and purple and art and all of that is a part of who I am, and I am not going to remove those parts of me so that I can show up in some sterile environment. And so that Eddie back there is a conscious, very conscious choice to remind myself and others, these are humans we're interacting with, not dragons, but humans.
Great context. And it's a real background we're looking at, which is refreshing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, you're welcome.
Well, I think this is a really good lead in. One of the things I really enjoyed talking with you about that you focus on is your company climate inventory service offering. And I know that sounds like a lot, but it's very interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I would love to. The company climate inventory, or CCI for short, that rolls off the tongue a little bit easier, perhaps, is one of my favorite things to talk about because it is such a powerful tool. We liken it to an annual physical for an organization. So you're going to go to the doctor, get a checkup. How's your heart doing? How are the lungs? How's your breathing? Any aches and pains? What's working well? Wouldn't that be nice if that showed up in our annual trips to the doctor? What do we need to work on? And so that's really what the CCI does. We measure several areas and really get an overall health of the organization. And then we deliver those results to our clients. Here's the strengths of your organization. Here are some gaps. Here's what we recommend you focus on in priority order. And then here's an implementation roadmap. So it's not just a data dump of results, but it's here's what's going on with your organization, and here's what you can do about it. True actionable steps. And from there, the organization can take that information. There are probably things that they can work on internally. There may be things that they need support from outside services, such as my company, the Schuler Group, your company, and overall in service to making that organization a strong, successful, sustainable organization.
Sounds fantastic. What have you noticed changes the most when the businesses and organizations you do that with? What are some of the interesting outcomes that happen after they do that with you?
It's an interesting question because every organization is different. All of our results are different, and there may be some themes or trends. Communication almost always shows up as something to work on. Again, that's such a broad topic. It could be internal communications from the top down, more transparency, more collaboration between departments and instead of being siloed. So so the benefits and the ahas are all different. I will say that we get two responses, and while they seem um, in contrast to one another, we often get both of these what did I just say? The ahas or whatever from the leadership team in the same meeting. So the first one is the leadership, CEO, executive, et cetera, going, this resonates, or I suspected this, and this confirms what I've been feeling all along. And at the same time, there will be something in our report and our debrief where it takes them aback, and you can just see that they're shocked. So it's almost as if something's happening on two different levels. And again, almost always in the same meeting, they have that resonates. I suspected that. That feels good. That feels true. And oh my gosh, like that's a harsh reality. And those are the benefits, right? Because the leaders need good information to make good strategic decisions. So I don't know if that quite answered your question, but that is certainly something that we do see as a common thread in our engagements with the CCI.
You did answer my question. What I would say is I think that's a very common reaction anytime a business that wants to improve seeks out outside counsel and assessment or insights to have an objective viewpoint. There is a benefit to working with people that can come in, look at the big picture, and give you a scorecard, an assessment, a report that lets you know where are you on the right track, where are your assumptions correct, and what are some things that you didn't realize were going on that you should address as soon as possible. That's the whole point of that exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the shock, I think, is because it was something they hadn't even thought of or could think of. And that's the beauty of doing that type of exercise. That works in your program you're doing. I see that all the time with the panoramic operations roadmap that I do with organizations. It's just that's, I think, a fun moment for me when you can share with people what to keep doing, start doing, and stop doing, so you can be the best possible organization possible. So that's how I think there's comfort, I think, for our audience, knowing that that's an expected reaction and that it's a common trend we both see. Maybe we can start to educate people and they'll be excited. Okay, what do I know? What do I don't know? Like that might be, maybe like we talk about it more, that might be the future reaction.
Exactly. And I like the way you said it too. What should we keep doing? What should we stop doing? What should we start doing? I really like that. It's very succinct. So I might use that in a few of my conversations.
Go for it. I did not create that. That's just the language that many of the CEOs I work with like to use. So I'm reflecting back. Go for it. I think your ideal client would like that too. Let's talk a little bit. We're talking about reports and assessments. I would love to know, what are some of the cyclical experiences you've observed in business over the years? I ask this question because we always think like this moment right now seems really slow, fast, worrisome. And looking historically and reflecting on cyclical experiences can give us a bit of education. And it's great to hear how other people have looked at things cyclically and take some of that into our own assessment. So tell me, what have you seen over the years?
So it's really interesting because I think a lot of us have a certain um, concept, preconceived notion of what those cycles are. We, those of us I think pretty much all of us went through school, and especially those of us who are parents and have children who go through school, we tend to have that September through May mentality. There's always this freshness that happens in the fall, and this the smell of new school supplies is very exciting. And then there's the wind down in May and beginning of June, and lots of vacations during the summer. And so I think a lot of us have that cycle imprinted in our brains and maybe even in our cells. And so we think, and some of us even say, oh, well, business is slow during the summer, or, it slows down near the holidays. And what I've learned is that each organization has its own cycle. And so, for example, we have one client that their busiest time is fourth quarter, all the way up until December 31st. So forget about, Thanksgiving and Christmas in the US. It's they are jam packed as soon as October hits. Whereas for other organizations, it may start to slow down mid-November. So there's not a one size fits all cyclical trend. I would say to that question, look at your own organization and what are the cycles and what are the trends? And then be aware that that's not necessarily one size fits all true for the rest of the world and the rest of the organizations.
Great advice. And once you start to assess your own cyclical, seasonal elements in your business, maybe don't get too attached to it, because there could be something external that happens that maybe changes that a bit too. I'm just thinking, if your business is slow in the summer, that doesn't mean you slow down selling, in my opinion. You keep selling in other ways and see if you can land different business during the summer. That's just my operational brain thinking for that consistent sales revenue aspect of a business. So I like to challenge those types of thoughts and see, can we change that? How can we evolve that? Because sometimes I see people slow down, anticipating a slowdown when they could keep going and have an even more successful year.
Exactly. And then I would also challenge leaders of organizations to think beyond, yes, what are the cycles and trends in their own organization, and look at what's happening in the world. There has been and continues to be a huge shift in the workforce. And the workforce that is coming up is far different from, say, the boomer generation. And it's not right or wrong. Not one is better than the other. They just happen to be facts. And, and so an organization must adapt and must change and cannot force, well, it should be this way. Well, you may want it to be this way, but nature is ever adapting, ever changing, and so organizations need to adapt and need to change. So, along with what are the trends, what are the cycles, what does that tell us? What information does that help give us? And how do we need to adapt and change? Um, and going back to that whole human resources, humans adapt, change, and evolve. We are not static. Um, I do arts and crafts on the side, and my very first cross stitch was of this girl cross stitching, which is funny. But the little saying is, "I am not the same person today that I was yesterday." And I think that is so true. I am not the same person I was yesterday. I will be a different person tomorrow. Not wholly different, but life is just, amazing and changing, and we need to evolve and adapt. So that's another reason to focus on the human side of organizations.
Well said. Thinking of all that great advice you've just shared, I'm curious if you could go back and share one piece of advice to yourself in the first few years of starting your business, what would you say?
I have so many pieces of advice because since I started my business in 2002, I've had lots of learnings and lots of lessons since then. My goodness. And my business has changed pretty dramatically over the course of those 22 years. So, so that's a little bit of a hard one. What I'd rather do is think like, okay, let's go back 5 years or 7 years. And what would be the advice I would give my, 5, 7 years ago self? And it would be, don't chase after every opportunity. Do your due diligence, do your research. Does this fit into your long-term goal? Does it fit into your own strategic plan for the organization? Hopefully you have a strategic plan. Hopefully you have kind of a multi-phase vision of where your organization goes. And so if you have that vision, then how does this particular opportunity that has presented itself fit into that? That would be probably the biggest advice I'd give to me 5 to 7 years ago.
Well said. My barometer test if something fits into the vision is if I refer to the vision when I'm talking about a new idea. And if I feel really good about being energized and excited about where things could go with that idea. If I'm not seeing that with something that new in my business, then I have to go back and reflect and understand why am I doing it and did I miss something? And just really evaluate that. So really well said. Thank you for sharing that. Before we go, I want to know, what are you really excited about right now that you're working on at the moment that you haven't talked about yet? Is there something you're really enjoying?
So one of the things I had mentioned that we have a program called Dysfunctional Communication Styles in the Workplace. And that's really the brainchild of my husband and partner, Mark. And we've trained it several times. And it is one of the biggest sought after, when I look at the Google Analytics of our website, it is one of the top pages that comes up. It was a blog post that Mark wrote years ago. So it was buried in the website, but it kept coming up as number one, even higher than the homepage, or number two. And so it took me a few years, but I convinced him, let's create an online course version, because we can only train it live so much, right? We're limited on our staff hours. But if we have an online version, then we can reach more people. So we have launched that in what I call the TSG, the Schuler Group Learning Center. You can tell I like my acronyms. I think I just want to like save time and just do it quickly. But in the TSG Learning Center, we're building out our online course platform, and that's very exciting. We're having a great time doing that.
Sounds wonderful. What a great example of how you're productizing your insights and strategy in a way to access and give more people an opportunity to learn. It's exactly, I think, how we should do it, where you've proven it, you've seen interest. You're seeing the trends over and over, and now it's time to repackage it in a way that you can give it to more people at the same time. Awesome. It's great to see that.
Thank you.
Well, Dawn, it's been a pleasure to have you here today and talk about communication. I know we could probably spend a whole other hour just geeking out about all the ways to be an effective communicator. I really appreciate you shared how you help organizations, some tips with us here today. And I can't wait to hear more about what you're working on with your online programming and celebrating all the great accomplishments that are to come. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Steph, and thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You're most welcome. Take care.